everyone, I'm so glad to be with you today. I'm Mary Lou and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time with us, then thanks for joining us. Today, this is the card that we're going to make. We're going to make a spinner card, and I'm actually going to show you 3 different variations of this card and how to use it. And I've loved doing this card. So this ends up being a 5.5 by 4.25 card. I think they call that an A2 size. Don't know why, but that's what it is. So I'm starting with just this blank piece of cardstock. I'm going to use my waffle flower blending tool. These are new for me and I'm really enjoying them. And I'm using an ink pad from Lawn Fawn and it's called Mermaid. That's the color. And it's just this light, fun, really nice greenish blue. And I'm creating sort of a summer sky. That's my purpose here. So I'm just doing this real quickly to get some background color onto this card. Now I'm going to take this blue piece and lay it in on the center of the card, and that's going to show up behind our spinner element. So I'm going to use my score buddy and just put a line straight down the middle of that card so it can fold with the rest of the card. And I really like this score buddy, and of course you can just fold it in half, but I'm going to show you a little bit down the line in this video of why I really like the score buddy. And then I'm putting that little piece of paper through my Big Shot with an embossing folder and this silicone pad to create just a background textured paper to go behind the spinner element. And I just really like this one. It's got little circles on it, and I will try as best I can to link all of these products in the description below. Some of my products I've had for a very long time, and I'll try to find something similar if I can't find the exact product. And you can also find links to these products in my blog, and there will be pictures and more details about how I make each of these cards. So now that blue piece of textured cardstock is going to go right in the center of that card, and it'll end up behind the spinner. All right, so now let's create the part where the spinner is going to be. This piece of paper is a 1/4 inch smaller all around than my card. And so I've cut this at 10 3/4 by 4 inches, and it's going to end up just perfect as the insert to this card. So once again, I'm going to score this halfway down the middle, and of course you can do that without the score buddy at all. But in just a minute, you'll see another use for the score buddy that just makes this card so easy. So once I have my center line, I am going to create a window cutout. So I'm using these dies, these nesting circle dies with a stitch around the outside. I use these all the time. You've seen me use them over and over. And I found this really fun summer stamp set at the Dollar Tree. And so I picked it right up and was really excited to find a stamp set for $1. Now, there are some things about these Dollar Tree stamp sets that make them a little bit trickier to use, and I will discuss that as we go along upcoming in the video. So now I'm going to find a window that works just right with this beach ball. And so I'm thinking I'm going to go with this smaller one just because I just think it'll work better and give more focus onto the beach ball. So after measuring center, so I know it's centered just right on the card, I'm going to use my pixie tape, which has very low tack, remeasure, make sure I've got it in the middle, and then I'm going to send that through my Big Shot to create that nice window in the middle of that card. And I'll save that little piece for use in some other thing. So now that I have my window, now I'm going to make sure it works with my little beach ball. Now is where that score buddy comes in real handy. I'm going to fold that card in half and then use my ruler to figure out a distance from the edge of the window that will give me enough space to keep that window working just like it should, but also help me make a fold. So I'm measuring outside of the window, a little over a quarter inch, probably 3/8 of an inch. And because I have the score buddy, it's really easy to make sure I get the distance on both sides exactly the same. So I can just score that, fold it, and then I've got kind of an M-shaped fold. And I can go through and reinforce those folds. I want the spinner part to poke out, the other two parts to go in. And so you see I have an M or a W shape out of that inner card. Now I'm going to use my Misty stamping tool. I'm taking out the paper pad that it comes with, and I just really love this tool. And what I did is I took an old Cricut mat and I cut it down. So it's an old one where most of the sticky is gone from it, but I cut it down to just the size of that inner mat of the Misty, and that helps hold my cards and my paper pieces as I'm stamping in the Misty. It works so well, and that's just a little trick that you can do if you have an old Cricut mat. And then I'm going to take a scrap of white cardstock. I'm going to use my bar magnet that comes with the Misty to help hold that down. And then I'm going to place um, my little beach ball from that stamp set and just put it down and pick it up with my Misty so that I can then stamp 2 or 3 times in the same spot. And so I'm also going to be doing some embossing. I want the beach ball to be red and white, and I don't have any red embossing powder. So I'm going to use my clear embossing powder and my Lawn Fawn lobster ink cube, and I'm just going to ink up that ball and go ahead and stamp it, and I'm going to stamp it lightly a couple of different times so I get a nice bright red ball. Then I can come back in. I'm going to actually clean up my stamp a little bit, and then I am going to come in with a Versamark stamp pad. Now this creates kind of a clear, sticky substance over the top of that stamp that I can then put embossing powder on and go ahead and emboss this. So I don't have a lot of different colors of embossing powder. I like to use a pretty colored stamp pad and my Versamark and clear embossing powder, because then I don't need to buy a whole bunch of different powders. And you will see that it embosses as if it's a red embossing powder. So I put that embossing powder on. That Versamark substance stays sticky for quite a while, so it gives you time to get the powder on. And then you can see once I heat it, it turns to that beautiful bright red. Now I'm going to repeat that process with the Versamark and the embossing powder a few different times to really create some depth to that embossing powder. So I can reapply the clear embossing powder while the first coat is still hot and wet, or I can let that dry, reapply the Versamark and the embossing powder. So there are a couple of different ways to do this. Both work just fine. And so either way, you're going to end up with a nice, shiny red and white beach ball. I just love that. I think it looks so fun, and it's shiny and cheerful and has some depth. And so you can do that either way, with reapplying the Versamark or applying the embossing powder a second time before it cools completely. And now I'm going to create another beach ball because these are going to be glued back to back as part of the spinner. But one thing I found out with these dollar store stamps, they lose their sticky a lot faster than the better quality stamps. And you'll see I made a goof because what happened is I stamped a second time with the beach ball, but it kind of wasn't sticky enough and fell off of my Misty, and then it wasn't in the right place and I messed up. And so I'm redoing, but this time I am applying a tape runner tape to the back of that stamp, and then it picks up just fine in the Misty and holds up. So with those Dollar Tree stamps, you might have to apply some extra sticky to them. And then we'll repeat that process with the red ink and with the Versamark. Now, one other thing is these Dollar Tree stamps are not etched as deeply as the maybe the more expensive, better quality stamps. And so it's easy to get a little bit of oh, what would you call it, shadow in that big area in the beach ball. I actually ended up getting a little stamp through shadow. So what you're going to have to do with the Dollar Tree stamps is stamp more lightly but more layers. Does that make sense? So instead of pushing hard on those stamps, you need to just keep your pressure really light so that you don't get those weird shadows. So the stamp set is super cute and well worth buying, but you're going to have to be lighter with how you stamp. So just use those couple of little reminder techniques as you are using the Dollar Tree stamps. You might have to add sticky and to use lighter pressure. So I just repeated that, and now I have two beach balls the same size, and I can use those for the two sides of that spinner element. So we're going to go ahead and work on that inside. I'm going to show you how to create the part that creates the spin. So I have some embroidery floss. It's just an off-white, and I take a section of that. And you know, embroidery floss comes with actually 6 little strings. I'm using 3 of those. And that three strands actually creates a really nice spin. So what I'm doing is attaching it at the top with some very strong double-sided tape. I'm also going to use some glue, and I'm going to use a piece of scrap paper to just create a really secure bond at the top and the bottom of that string. So you'll see here I'm applying that strong double-sided tape and then removing the paper so it's actually double-sided. And then after that, I'm going to put on the scrap paper and then refold that, reinforce that fold. So that is really strong, held down. Then I'm going to stretch the string taut, and at the bottom, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put glue, a strong double-sided tape, and then a little piece of scrap paper, and that's just going to hold that string nice and tight and keep it from coming out. And then I'll go ahead and reinforce those folds once again. And now we're ready to put our beach balls on. So I'm going to put the back one on first and use that circle at the top to help me line it up. And I'll line it up so that the string runs right through the middle of that object that we're using for the spinner. I'm going to put on some nice heavy-duty double-sided tape. And then I will remove the backing off of that. I will add some more glue, and then I'll go ahead and position that front piece right on top so it lines up just right. And then to get that element to spin, you wind it up and it twists that string. And then when you let it go, it will spin. And so that's how you get that to work. Now I'm going to finish the outside of that card. I'm using some brown craft paper, and I'm going to use a die cut, a die that cuts into kind of a rounded shape. So first, after measuring this bit on the card, I just cut it into a bumpy sand mountain shape, and then I'm going to cut that other piece out of the die, cut it apart, and use it in the middle to create a kind of a 3D look. I'm adding some color and depth to the brown craft paper by using my blender brush and some brown from Lawn Fawn. And then I'm going to add these bent elements, and you'll see it just sort of creates a fun sort of mound look without too much work. And then I'm going to kind of figure out what else I'm doing. In this Lawn Fawn Life is Good set, there are so many wonderful stamps. I'm going to use the palm tree because I think that will go along really well with our card, and I'm keeping the card kind of simple. So first I'm going to stamp the palm tree in a couple of different shades of brown, a little bit darker on the bottom, lighter on the top, and you really can't tell on camera the different shades of brown, but they are there. And then I'm going to just come in with my colored pencils and color all of those in. A little bit lighter brown on the bottom, and then right under the leaves and down one side of the trunk, a darker brown. And then I'm going to come in with a dark green and establish some shadow on the leaves, and then come in with a lighter green to color those in. So I've got some depth on those palm fronds, and so that the trees have a little bit of shade and shadow. Um, you might hear some running water. I hope that doesn't bother you. My daughter's tower garden is running, and so there you go. So now I'm going to use the matching die cut that goes along with this set, and I'm going to one by one center that die cut very carefully over the trees and then put them through my big shot. And then I'm going to use the rest of that paper to create just white backgrounds of those trees so that I've got several. On one of the trees, I am going to go ahead and glue together all of those pieces of white so that I'm creating a thickness in one of the trees. So it actually has some depth, and it becomes kind of thick and solid, and really helps it stand out from the card. With something like this, I prefer to do this with multiple die cuts glued together rather than trying to use some kind of foam tape or something. I just think this works better and is actually really pretty easy and just creates this nice weight to this small item that really makes it fun. Now I'm going to go ahead and position my trees before I glue on that bottom sand part. Once I figure that out, and you'll see that those multiple layers create a real thickness to that tree that really is nice for the card, and yet it's still thin enough to go through the mail. So I'll figure out my positioning here. I want to situate the trees so they're on different levels across the top, and I will glue the back tree down. And then I will glue down the sand element, and I'll hold that sand part there so I can get a good position on that tree. And I'm going to use some really strong adhesive on that sand part so that it really sticks down well and holds as it goes through the mail. And then once I have that down, I'm just going to flip the card over and trim off any overhang that might be there just so it lines up well with the card. Now I'm ready to put on my tree that has all those extra layers. It's got extra depth, and it just stands up from the card and just looks really nice once I have that depth down. So I'm using those mounds in that sand to kind of help me decide where to position that. There we go. All righty. Now let's add some of those same elements to the inside so that the inside mimics the outside and it ties together well. I'm going to add two different sentiments to this card. One is from that Lawn Fawn Life is Good set, and the other is from the Dollar Tree Summer set. And so remember, I'm going to have to use that Dollar Tree one by stamping lighter. So I'm going to do a multiple stamps lightly pressed on both of these, and I'm going to do them at the same time. Now I'm going to go ahead and just use black, and this Altenew Obsidian is my favorite black ink. I've tried several black inks, and this is the one that I have come back to. Some of the blacks I really do not like because after a while they actually come out purple, and so I like this Altenew Obsidian. I'm putting down first an anti-static powder because I'm going to be using the Versamark, and I want it to I want to be able to put the embossing powder only on the letters. And so I'm coming back in with my clear embossing powder because since I have stamped with black, those letters are going to come out black when all is said and done. And you'll see this as I add the heat from the heat gun, it turns into this nice shiny black that just really stands out, that has a little bit of texture. And so I'm actually going to do the embossing powder twice and get those all ready to layer. Now, when I showed you before, I showed cutting out several dies and gluing them together. Here's another idea. Instead of doing several layers of cardstock, you can actually use old packaging because that packaging is already pretty thick and sturdy. And so if you take your sentiment and just glue it to some sturdy packaging and cut it out, you can do that with just one layer. You can have a nice sturdy word strip. And then I'm just going to back this with some of this nice yellow to help bring that nice summer feel, that lightness of the sun. And I'm just barely adding that yellow so it just barely shows around the edge. Let's also get our inside word strip done. This is our Life is Good word strip from the Lawn Fawn Life is Good set. And I'm just backing that with some foam tape because it's the width of the word strip, and so it will back it all really well. So I just am using some strong adhesive to get those word strips on. Now, before we connect that spinner element to the card, I want to add just a little bit more sparkle and pizzazz to those trees. So I'm bringing in this Art Glitter brand glitter. And I really like this. It's really fine, really pretty, and lasts forever. So I just put some of my Art Glitter glue on top of the trees in lines, and then I'm just sprinkling that glitter over the top and shaking off the rest into my little garbage pail, and it just adds this extra little element of glitter. And so I'm going to shake it off in a direction that it doesn't catch on my word strips or other elements. Now let's add that spinner part to the card. So on the inside, on the back side, I am adding some very strong adhesive tape to both sides, 3 strips on each side. I'm going to take the backing off of one side first and get that laid out and lined up onto the card, just positioned right. And then I'll go ahead and fold the whole spinner part up, and I'm going to then remove the tape backing from the other side of the adhesive tape, and then I can fold the card over, get it lined up, push it down, and then it just closes up just right and will be lined up just as it ought to be for that spin element to work. And so there's that finished card. with its glitter, with its word strips, and it's just so fun and ready for summer. To get it charged or ready, I will spin the ball, and then you can slip it into a card, and that keeps it ready to spin. Then when you open the card and take it out, there you get that really nice spin on that ball, on that spinner element. I just love these cards. I think they are so much fun and really pretty easy to do. Just make sure before you put it in the envelope that you twist up the spinner and make sure that it is all ready to go. Now I want to show you another version of this card. This time I am using some butterflies. And when you're doing these spinner cards, it's best to use a spinning element that is symmetrical on both sides. If you have something that is not symmetrical, use a circle or something that is symmetrical and just stamp on that and use that in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same as I did with my beach ball. I'm covering this though in a gold embossing powder, and that raises those parts of the butterfly and make it so that you can color inside of it. And that's what we're going for. We're going to use the embossing and colored pencils again and our art glitter and go ahead and do this for these butterflies that will turn out so pretty. And so I am backing this with I'm using an orange colored pencil all over, and then I'll put on my glue, spread that through, and then add that art glitter, and you will see that these butterflies just turn out so, so beautiful, and they just have such a nice um, shiny, fun spin to them when you open the card and you see how that spinner comes out. So I don't have a matching die to go with these. So these I'm just going to fussy cut and just get them cut out. I'm not going to worry about those skinny little antennae on there. I'm just going to cut out the main body of the butterfly on both sides of it, and then we'll go ahead and get those glued together like we did the other one. Now, one more time, I'm going to show you how to create that fold that works for the spinner card. You cut out a window, and then you use your scorer to create score lines equal distance from each side of the window. Fold it into a nice M or W shape. And then you'll go ahead and do the same thing with the 3 strands of the embroidery floss, and you're going to anchor those securely to the back side of that spinner card part so that that string does not pull out. And you really want those anchored and that string pulled taut. So, and then here we are putting on the back side of the butterfly and then adding the front. I'm adding a little bit of green to the front of this card. You'll see I actually eventually am going to cover that up. I changed my mind, but that's part of card making. You go along and you change your mind and do it differently. Now, that same set of butterflies that I also got at the dollar store came with the smaller butterfly and a larger one. So for the outside of the card, I'm going to use this larger butterfly, and I only need one side because this is not a spinner element, but I'm preparing the butterfly much like I did that other one with the gold embossing and the coloring and other things. Then I'm backing this one with some blues and greens, and then I'm going to use the green glitter on this one. I think the art glitter that's green is so pretty, and you'll see how well this comes out. I am backing this using that technique that I already showed you with backing it with old packaging to make it stiff, to give it some dimension. And then I'll go ahead and figure out where I want it on the card. Now I'm going to back that whole butterfly with some foam tape to really make it stand out from the card. And then I can just trim down the edges a little bit so that the foam tape fits just right behind it. And so that is pretty much ready. Now I'm taking this light green and that same embossing folder that I used for the first card with the blue backing. I'm using that same folder that has little circles on it. And I just really like how this looked. So you see, I am covering up all of that green I did. I didn't need to do that because I liked this better. And then I'm just adding some little strips of that same cardstock to the back to start making a front to this card that will be beautiful. So I'm trimming off the strips and figuring out where my butterfly would go. I wanted to add a little bit more interest to the front of this card. And that Life is Good stamp set, the die set that goes with it, had a little round die that when punched out perfectly fit the little holes that were in this card, or that embossed indent. And so I decided to do an embossing inlay with dots. So these actually lay into the indents with that embossing folder. And what happened was I actually ran out of the first green color, and I looked and looked and could not find a matching color. So I went in ahead and brought in a different shade, moved the dots around, and I actually end up liking this even better, having the two different colors of the green dots. And please excuse my head. It got into the camera quite a bit. Sorry about that, but I'm hoping that you can see how I went ahead and did this embossing inlay. And then I went ahead and put that beautiful glittery butterfly on the outside. And I just really like how this turned out. I went ahead and added some sentiments. I added the Life is Good from that same stamp set. And I just really like how that turned out. To finish everything off, I went ahead and added the spinner part of the card, just like I did the previous card, and brought the whole thing together. If you prefer not to fold the card closed, you can also just line it up that way and do those two sides separately. So let's look at the cards. On this one, the summer one, we've got that dimension added to the palm tree. We've got our fun beach ball spinner that we charge by spinning it up and then closing the card. And I just love how when you open this up, it spins and is just so fun. I love that card. I made two of that same card to give away. And then we also did our card with the embossing and the inlaid dots to go along with the embossing and that beautiful glittery butterfly, the larger butterfly on the outside and the smaller butterflies as the spinner on the inside. Now this butterfly set I did get from the Dollar Tree, and so same thing, the same tips apply that I used with the summer ones. You'll probably have to add a little bit of tape to the back of that stamp when you use it in your MISTI or onto an acrylic block. But I just love this butterfly. Look how beautiful it is when you open it up and it spins, it picks up that glitter. And I just think that is just so pretty. I think this is probably my favorite of the spinner cards that I did just because that butterfly looks so pretty when it's spinning. I did do one other spinner card that I wanted to show you. This is a thank you card, and I did the same sort of similar inlay with embossing, and I'll show this on a future video, but it just turned out so pretty. And then I did a thank you as the spinner. And I just love how that turned out. After I did that first spinner card, I am now able to make these cards pretty quickly. They're just so fun and so easy. And I hope you enjoy those cards. I hope you'll take the time to make a spinner card because they're so much fun. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and we will see you next time.